Commissioner, let's start out with the controversy and get right into some meaty stuff here. The bill leader situation has been in the news a great deal off and on, and it's been turned into saga proportions as it has developed. Could you kind of capsulize what has happened and where it stands now? Because some of our viewers may be a little confused on exactly, is there going to be another hearing, or what's the situation right now?
Well, I thought the first part of your question was an encapsulation, I assume, of the issues. And what has happened is that a simple personnel problem within the Public Service Commission has, for reasons that I don't understand entirely, become a major cause. And it has, rather than being handled administratively as it should have been, it became aired and became a public issue, which is not very appropriate for a personnel problem. Where it stands now is that the commission was told that it acted improperly and it had to go back to square one, and Mr. Leader was reinstated as an employee, and the commission was told that he was to have a hearing and to be able to refute allegations made against him.
Was that Judge Wiseman's ruling?
That's Judge Wiseman's ruling in the federal court. They said his due process, his constitutional rights had been violated, and that he was to go back, he was to be reinstated and to be given a fair and impartial hearing. That's where it stands now, essentially. There's some sidebars which I'll go into if you want.
Well, you stated that it was a personnel problem. What was the problem?
The problem was that there was some high tempers and some inelegant and inappropriate language, which has long ago been cleared up. These problems go back to prior to last June, and suddenly, as of September, they became an issue when they were no longer even operative.
Who brought it up as an issue? You mentioned that it had become a cause. Who did that, and what was their motivation?
Well, I've been told often that I can't look into the head of my colleague, Mr. Cochran, and he has told me that on other occasions, under other circumstances, that I can't presume to know what he was thinking or what his motivation is. I do suspect that there were several reasons. One was that there was some difference in the political race in which Mr. Cochran was personally and deeply involved, and he did not appreciate the fact that Mr. Leader had been helpful to another candidate who was in fact opposing him. However, it really does go back before that. Before I was even sworn into the commission, I was told by Mr. Cochran that he did not want me to, really was not comfortable about my coming to the commission, and hoped I would not be a problem. And I assured him that I was a good team player and that he had nothing to worry about, which only time would prove to him. My saying so, I knew, would not make much of a difference.
Of course, you can't see into another person's motivations or into their head, but why? What's your best guess as to why he feels that way?
I don't know why. I obviously made him uneasy. I obviously, either because I was a woman or because of whatever else I brought with me, whether I don't know. I don't know. It would be purely speculative, and it would be hard for me to guess whether it was just the uniqueness of my person or I in some way proved threatening to him.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that ultimately Mr. Leader will be cleared, if that's the proper word, or do you think he's going to lose his job?
One of the things that has occurred is that charges have been made as if, well, that's not exactly true either. What the news media has done is said that Mr. Leader has been accused of things that in fact he has not been accused of. And there are so many half-truths in the whole situation there that it becomes just very difficult to deal with because we're dealing with half-truths and incomplete information. It's as if I were to say that I would have thought Mr. Leader had been singing the Star-Spangled Banner except his lips weren't moving. So that and then the headline comes back, Leader accused of singing the Star-Spangled Banner. This is what has happened. Not that the issue has been brought up and refuted within the same sentence, but what remains is that the issue has in fact been raised and not how it's been resolved.
I think what most of the public is focused on is that the charge that Mr. Leader used inflammatory language or was abusive in some way towards PSC staff that's true, isn't it?
He has used a poor choice of language. He has a quick temper, and I don't think he has a great deal of patience with bureaucracies and their slow workings, but I have not found that he was abusive. I did ask him to clean up his language because I found it unprofessional, and I didn't want any part of it, and he did so. So that became a nullity as an issue, but it was brought up again as though it were still current.
Well, then you obviously don't approve of the way that Mr. Leader has managed or interacted with the other members of the PSC
I certainly
staff.
don't approve of his choice of language, and I would have preferred that he had more patience, but neither of those things are crimes, and neither of those things should be, if everyone was fired who used bad language, we would have more unemployed than we have now.
Commissioner, the state legislature is considering this term some changes in the nature of the commission. Isn't that a response to all of what seems to be the politically motivated infighting that's been going on within the commission?
It has been said that that is part of the reason for some of the proposals. Sometimes we don't know what the real reasons are. Sometimes we just are dealing with excuses for reasons and not real reasons at all.
Given the impact of the tremendous controversy surrounding Mr. Leader, do you honestly feel that he can make a positive contribution in that job?
Well,
whether he was right or wrong, guilty or not, the controversy is there. Don't you think that pretty well diminishes his capacity to be effective?
Mr. Leader's job is as my administrative assistant. Nothing that has been said impairs his obvious ability. He's very bright. He works very hard. He works more hours than anyone I know. His brain is no less intact than it was before the charges were made. And his work as my research and administrative assistant is unimpaired. Perhaps his ability to communicate with other members of the staff might be a little inhibited, but it should not necessarily be so.
Thank you. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be back in just a few seconds. Our guest this morning is Commissioner Jane Eskind of the Public Service Commission. Commissioner, are you going to run for Senator Baker's seat?
I don't know. I thought about it. I am thinking about it. I'm getting a lot of encouragement to do so. I thought I would be a good senator in 1978. Nothing's occurred since to change my mind on that.
What will make up your mind for you?
Well, there's several things that you have to take into consideration. First of all, it's very costly, not just in terms of money, but in terms of time and energy and what else you can do with your, what your other priorities are at the time. Secondly, I think you need to take a realistic view at where you are and where the voters are, and is that how is that what you want to do? And is that a commitment that you're willing to make?
If you do make the decision to run, who do you consider to be your toughest potential opponent in the primary?
Well, the only person I've heard about who's considering running, who is at least seriously considered as running, is Congressman Gore.
Can you beat him?
Well, I think so. You see, I've run statewide races before, and he has run only in his congressional district. He ran once when he was challenged, and in that first race, he only got 32% of the vote in his congressional district. Since then, he's been untested and unchallenged, and I've, since then, have run 4 times statewide, 2 primaries and 2 general elections. So I have recognition east and west, and certainly a statewide constituency.
Wouldn't you have to agree that Congressman Gore has made, absolutely made the most of his position in Congress, that his image has steadily improved, started well, and then got better? His exposure in the media has been excellent. Don't you think that he's going to be a terribly tough opponent?
Oh, I have never shied away from a difficult race, and I'm not saying that he will be easy or difficult. I think the congressman works hard, and I think he has a lot of friends in the news media.
Do you think the news media is biased in favor of Congressman Gore?
I think he has a lot of friends, and I think he's a former newspaper man, and I think he gets good press. That's not to say they're biased, but it's to say he gets good coverage.
Who would be the most difficult Republican candidate in the general?
Lamar Alexander.
Since Lamar has taken himself out of the picture, who would be the second toughest?
Howard Baker.
Okay, let's go down to number 3.
No, but the interesting thing is, and I have thought about this obviously. The interesting thing is that the Republican Party seems to have one candidate for one office at one time, and when something happens to that candidate, there's a vacuum that it needs to be filled. And at this point, there really is no strong Republican waiting, ready to run. At least I don't see one. Now, they have time to remedy that, and I think that was the reason that Senator Baker made the announcement he did so early, is in order to build a candidate. The richness of the Democratic Party is that they always have plenty of candidates ready to run, and they don't need the time to build a candidate, as the Republican Party obviously feels it must do now.
Let me suggest a couple of names,
Sure.
and you give me your reaction as to how tough they would be, or what kind of candidate you think they would be. Fred Thompson.
Fred Thompson is articulate. He has a wonderful voice. He has been active in legal circles. I don't know how he would be received by the voters. I think he could be a good candidate. I just don't know. I've not seen him in that role.
Winfield Dunn.
Winfield Dunn we have seen in the role as a candidate, and he has a good public, makes a good public impression.
Commissioner Sampson.
Commissioner Sampson has not been in the public eye, and I would not be able to judge. He's, by reputation, bright and competent.
The controversy, all of the recent controversy surrounding the Public Service Commission can't have done your image as a potential candidate any good. I think the question is, how much has it really hurt? What will the impact of that be on you as a candidate?
I don't think I'm in a position to make a decision. I can only evaluate it with some dispassion and say that I don't think a personnel problem at the Public Service Commission is an issue for the United States government. And I think that we need to put everything into perspective and realize that one man's choice of language or quick temper is really not relevant on the national scene.
But realistically, wouldn't you agree that the voter is not going to reason it out that carefully? They're going to say, oh, Jane Eskind, isn't she the commissioner, that woman that was mixed up in all that trouble with the Public Service Commission?
But at no time was there any sentiment, thought, or even hint that I in any way had acted improperly, so it couldn't impact on me.
Do you agree that there is, though, a carryover just in the involvement with bad publicity?
I think time would tell. I don't see. I think that the people of Tennessee have time and time and time again proven themselves to be fair and reasonable, and I think that they would be no less now.
Commissioner, does your decision to run pretty much depend on what Congressman Gore decides to do?
No, and I assume that his decision won't depend on what I decide to do either.
Al Gore, right now, because he has been the most talked about, along with you, candidate, has been recognized in some elements of the media and in a number of political circles as the strongest candidate that the Democrats can field. Why do you think there are so many people who have that perception? As because you pointed out, you've run statewide races and he hasn't. Why is there this perception? Is it because the media is biased, as you said, for Congressman Gore?
Oh, no, I don't feel that. I think that there's a perception that he is an attractive and informed person and a hard-working candidate and a hard-working congressman. I think there is also the conventional wisdom, and conventional wisdom among politicians sometimes becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. I think, however, that looking back on races that I have made, that the conventional wisdom was not always with me. Sometimes it was working against me, and I still prevailed, because I think that the conventional wisdom of politicians is not necessarily the way the voters go.
Well,
I think we can look at some past endorsements of groups and officials and see that the voters have a mind of their own.
What endorsements come to mind that haven't worked?
Well, we can all look back at losing candidates and see the impressive array of endorsements that they enjoyed during the campaign, and yet that did not seem to move votes. Those endorsers really only have their own vote that they can actually deliver.
What about the endorsements that really do carry some weight? What are those endorsements? Which ones would you like to get as a candidate?
Well, obviously, I'd like to get all of them, and each of them bring different elements of support and different kinds of support, and you want all the support you can get from everyone you can get it from. I would not want to say the endorsement of this or that group is not worthy. Obviously, they're all worthy.
Well, whether you make the decision to run or not, we wish you a lot of luck, and we appreciate you being here. Our guest has been Commissioner Jane Eskind of the Public Service Commission. Tune in tomorrow. Thank you.
We're rolling whenever you're ready.
Okay. Commissioner, I appreciate the time and the interview. What I'd like to talk about is your political future and that general subject. First thing I want to do is I'm going to name some jobs, and I want you to give me your reaction as to how each of these jobs appeals to you as a potential candidate. Senator, United States Senator.
Well, of course, I find the job, the position, very appealing. I thought it was appealing in 1978 when I ran, and nothing has occurred subsequently to change my mind about either the job or my ability to perform in it well.
Was that campaign worth it?
Well, I don't know what you mean by worth it. I certainly gained an awful lot. After the campaign was over, I sent a letter to the people who had helped me saying that I didn't feel we had lost even though I didn't get enough votes. I think it was a very rewarding experience.
Governor.
How do I feel about governor? I think it's an interesting job. I find the office of governor needing to be more responsive, being closer to the people than Washington is, but often it's Washington that more often is responsive than state government.
Congress, House of Representatives.
Congress is a difficult job. You are never not campaigning. You finish a campaign and then you have to begin again, so that you are not only performing the duties of the office along with the 437 other members of Congress, 436 other members, but you are constantly in the midst of a campaign. The value of being in the United States Senate is that there's a longer hiatus between campaigns, so that it's not so strenuous and you're not playing a dual role.
How about Mayor of Nashville?
Mayor of Nashville or any city, I think, is probably the most difficult job in the United States of America, because it's a job where you have all of the problems and very little ability to address the solution.
Annabelle Clement O'Brien and Sissy Baker were both soundly defeated recently in their bids for office. Being a woman obviously has a great impact on campaign strategy. How much impact does it have?
There are pluses and minuses, and that's not necessarily responsive to your question, but I think it probably ends up being a trade-off. The plus is that
What are the pluses and minuses?
The plus is that you have instant recognition. You don't have to build your recognition. You don't have to separate your face from the other candidates as one man among 5 men would have to do. You have recognition that's more ready. I had a lot of people say that we ought to have a woman be elected. Who knows? They certainly couldn't do any worse, and they might do a whole lot better. I think there were a lot of people who were for someone because they saw women as healers and curers, and the ministerial role that women play. It became very positive in that association. The negative is that there's the proverbial myth that women can't win, and so they don't, they're not going to do well, and then they have trouble raising money because the perception is among the people who give money and who are inclined to give their support, the perception is that they're not going to win, so they're not going to get the support, and then they end up playing a Cinderella sort of stepsister by the hearth role.
In your past campaigns, then, you have had trouble raising money?
Yes, but fortunately or unfortunately, I had some personal commitments that I would run a first-class, I would have what I needed for a first-class campaign, and I would not be behind the 8 ball in terms of being the, appearing as the stepchild candidate without equal funding.
You also mentioned that an advantage to being a woman candidate is the view that a woman is a healer. In light of what has been happening with the infighting in the commission, do you think you will still, in another race, have that image as a healer?
I think that the image of the woman is intact, and I certainly don't feel, and I'm falling into a trap with the question, and I don't, you know.
Yeah. Okay. You mentioned that women are seen as healers. Do you think, in light of the infighting that you have been involved in the commission, that you can maintain that image?
I don't think that I disagree with the premise that one had an adverse impact on the other. My feeling is that women are viewed as healers, and I don't think, I think that's the real issue, and the issues with the commission had nothing to do with that.
Tennessee voters don't elect many women to political office. Not many women run, but of course that's chicken or egg. They may not run because they don't feel they can get elected. How much do voters, based on your experience, how much do voters base their decisions on the sex of the candidate?
I don't know that that is a big issue in voters' minds. I have no way of knowing that. I would also argue with your conclusion that not many women run. We have over 300 women in public office in Tennessee. They are not highly visible, but they are certainly there, and they've been elected to every office in the state.
Why is it that the voters will entrust a county court clerk position or maybe a tax assessor to women, but Miss Annabelle, immensely popular, but they were not willing to give her that vote of confidence for the position of governor. So why do you think that is?
I can't speculate on why people voted one way or another. I think that women can run for anything they choose to run for, and I think they can be successful if they run smart campaigns. I think men can run for anything they want to run for, and they will be successful if they run smart campaigns.
Consider this scenario. Someone runs for office, and in their campaign for that office stresses the importance of the office and how important it is to do a good job in that position. The voters put their trust in the candidate, and he or she is subsequently elected. After being elected, that person then decides to run for a higher office before his or her term is complete. Don't the voters recognize this sort of thing is purely using an office as a stepping stone to further your own career? I mean, you make a commitment to do a job in an office and then pull out before the job is done to grab a higher plum. Don't you think the voters are wise to that?
I don't think the situation you've described is any different than an employee at GE going in to make toasters and getting an opportunity to change careers or advance in their career continuum, and it's a perfectly reasonable thing for someone to do.
Randy Tyree ran for governor and lost badly. He then immediately, when he saw that it would become available, expressed great interest in Senator Baker's seat until Al Gore surfaced as the front runner. Now Tyree says he might run for Congress. Isn't it getting painfully obvious that Randy Tyree is just out for any seat that he thinks he could win? And is that good for the Democratic Party?
Well, you make a lot of, there are a lot of suppositions in your sentence, and I don't know what Randy Tyree is thinking. I can't possibly judge that. I don't think it is bad for the Democratic Party to have a lot of people be interested in public service and we've always had a lot of candidates who are eager and willing and wanting to serve, and I don't see that as bad.
Commissioner State, thinking about your possible candidacy in the Senate race, a state Republican Party official said recently that you would be much easier to defeat in a general election than Congressman Gore. What is your reaction to that?
I have not heard that, but my own, and so I can't comment on what someone is supposed to have said. My own feeling is that I have had been a candidate for two different offices. In the first one, I was successful in the primary against all of the odds makers, thinking one of my opponents would win. In the general election, I lost, but my opponent was only able to get 55% of the vote, which makes him clearly vulnerable in any subsequent race. People who look at election statistics would feel that he could be had if that was all he could get as an incumbent. The third time I ran was again in the Democratic primary, and I got 55% of the vote in the primary, so even though I had 4 opponents, I got a majority even with the opposition. And in the general election, I got more votes than any other public official has ever gotten for a state office. So I think my record speaks for itself that I am well received by the voters and highly electable. On the other hand, Mr. Gore has had one contested election, and he won the primary with 32% of the vote. So I don't feel that the conclusion that you allege is, in fact, accurate.
Robin Beard, in an article in last Sunday's Tennessean, said that his defeat in the Senate race against Senator Sasser was so humiliating that the day after the race he just wanted to hide his face. What did Robin Beard do wrong from a strategy standpoint? What is your opinion? What did he do wrong in that Senate race to result in such a defeat?
I don't know that I can say that Robin Beard did anything specifically wrong. I think Jim Sasser did many things that were right, and he had the confidence of the voters of Tennessee.
What would Al Gore's biggest weakness be in a Senate race?
I don't think I'm prepared to discuss the Senate race at this time. I think it's too early to discuss what he might do or what I might do.
What would a congressman's weakness be in a statewide race?
Well, I think, obviously, if I were a congressman and wanted to run for statewide office, I would have to expand my name recognition and make it statewide and get support from across the state as a whole and not just in my congressional district.
Has Congressman Gore been able to do that?
I haven't seen a poll. I couldn't answer that.
If you decide not to run for the Senate, for Senator Baker's seat, who would you like to see run as the Democratic candidate?
The first question that I have to answer is what I'm going to do, and then after I have that answer, then we can talk about what else I'm going to do.
Commissioner, turning to the PSC for just a moment, has the Public Service Commission ever been accused of discrimination in hiring practices?
I'm not aware of any accusation that has been made against the Public Service Commission in any formal way.
It's no secret that you aspire to higher political office. Are you using
Who told you?
Are you using the commission as a stepping stone to another office, or is it just a nice place to be and make a great salary while you wait for another opportunity?
When I ran for the Public Service Commission, I ran because the commission had a great impact on the well-being and economic health of this state as a community. It does. It has a major role to play. I ran because I thought I would do a good job, and I think I am doing a good job as a Public Service Commissioner, and I will continue to do a good job as long as I'm there.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
The kids.
Well, you picked a subject I really like to talk about.
Where's your daughter? Seriously.
She lives in New York City, and she works for the Port Authority of New York, administrative assistant.
Okay. Commissioner, in the bill leader controversy, does the public react to your role in this differently because you're a woman?
I don't know how the public reacts to my role in this, but my role is very clear and very simple. All I've asked for is that the matter be handled fairly, and that is now being done, and I'm very, very pleased.
You have referred to the 2 or 3 specific instances when Mr. Leader used a bad choice of words. Are those the only instances in which that has ever happened with him in his tenure with the commission?
I don't remember referring to 2 or 3 specific instances. There are times when people get excited and use the wrong word, whether it's a poor choice words or an inappropriate choice of words. And this happens to each of us from time to time. I don't remember specifically how many times it occurred or not.
What if Bill Leader is eventually fired?
Well, that's speculative, and we don't know where the hearing is going to take us. We only know where we are now, and now we're on the right track in doing what is fair to the Commission and fair to Mr. Leader.
Why would Frank Cochran do this to you and Bill Leader?
Well, I can't imagine why anyone does the things they do. It would be speculative for me to guess.
Is Bill Leader obnoxious and unethical, or is he just psychotic?
Well, I don't think the leader is either. I think the leader is a conscientious, bright, hardworking, extremely intelligent person who has